Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember, bacon makes everything better.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the David Glenn Show, now seen and heard exclusively here on the North Carolina Sports Network. Our next guest grew up very close to Hillendale Golf Course right here in Durham, North Carolina, fell in love with the sport, became a competitive amateur golfer himself long ago, and has been an outstanding author and writer on, among other things, fascinating golf topics ever since, including for about a decade as the sports editor of the Augusta Chronicle newspaper in, of course, Augusta, Georgia. That's the home to one of the most famous golf courses in the world, Augusta National, and that only major golf championship that stays in the same place all the time. We call that the Masters. Our guy also has a fun golf-related story involving a couple of former ACC basketball players, so you'll want to hang around for that as well. But here across North Carolina, and especially here in this first half of June, golf fans actually have several opportunities to meet our guest today, longtime friend of the program, Ward Clayton, because Ward has special events here this month celebrating his newly released book, which is entitled The Legendary Caddies of Augusta National, Inside Stories from Golf's Greatest Stage. Ward will give you the website and other details so that you can find out how to get his book and, of course, how to meet him if you have that opportunity. But I'll just mention for now, he has an event in Wake Forest, North Carolina on Sunday, June 9th, another in Durham, near Hillendale or at Hillendale, where he grew up, on Monday night, June 10th, and another in Southern Pines on Tuesday night, June 11th, with that last event taking place not far from the legendary course Pinehurst number 2. Quick reminder to our statewide and beyond audience that the great state of North Carolina gets to host the U.S. Open this year, and Pinehurst number 2 will be that venue with competitive play from June 13th through June 16th. All that said, we bring in an old friend, Ward Clayton. Congratulations on the new book. Welcome back to the David Glenn Show, and thanks for being with us. How are you?
DG, I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to hear from you. Not only Augusta and Pinehurst, as you mentioned, but this is an unusual year for professional major golf tournaments. You could drive to 3 of the majors.
Right.
You could go from Augusta to Louisville, Kentucky, which they held the PGA Championship, and now to Pinehurst. So if you're in the southeastern United States, that's a pretty cool thing to be able to get to those tournaments pretty quickly.
Amen, brother. And I am going to ask you, tap into that big brain of yours on the U.S. Open because our state doesn't get to host majors all that often, but you're used to this major stuff. Given the title of your new book, again, The Legendary Caddies of Augusta National, Inside Stories from Golf's Greatest Stage, let's start with that 30,000 feet view, because I think even a lot of us who play golf or love to watch those elite golfers on television, we may not have a lot of experience specifically with caddies ourselves. So let's start with, how much do you think caddies, generally speaking, can impact the result of a professional golf tournament?
Just look at last week. Robert McIntyre won the Canadian Open. He was playing lousy and got his dad to come caddy for him and won the tournament. And, you know, his dad probably didn't do a whole lot of giving him yardage and reading putts, but his dad just being alongside of him was a tremendous support. So I think that's the psychological edge to it goes beyond anything you can do with reading a putt or giving a club or anything of that nature. And I think that's particularly pertinent when you talk about Augusta. Everybody knows Augusta for its emerald green fairways, humongous greens with a lot of different rolls to them, no rough. Then you come to Pinehurst. Pinehurst is particularly unique. You got these upside down saucer greens, and you got this wiregrass rough, which you can get a clean lie or you can be dead. So the caddies are particularly important at these two venues, which are out of the norm for these guys who are used to playing out a thick rough and fairly flat greens, not like the greens you see at Augusta or the greens at Pinehurst. So the caddies are going to have to temper the guys who get all frustrated when they get a bad break, or tell them they need to hit from the middle of the green and don't go for a flag stick, especially Pinehurst #2. So, I think it's so unique, DG. If you think about other sports, football's getting there now where you've got the radio set in the helmet of the player, the quarterback. Baseball's got more communication between the catcher and the pitcher.
Yeah.
But nowhere else do you have a situation where you got a guy standing right there at your right shoulder saying, "Hey, take it easy on this shot." He's trying to make sure you don't lose your cool. I think that's always been a unique thing with the caddy. They're an amateur psychiatrist all the way.
Ward Clayton is joining us on the David Glenn Show. I have known you for, I guess, we're at least 3 decades now, and I have followed your career enough to know that you write about many sports. You've written about many topics within those many sports. Let's start with the book in mind, just with the premise of what was it about specifically Caddies at Augusta National? And you focused on an era long, long ago. What was it about that entirety of circumstances that either intrigued you or inspired you to write this new book?
20 years ago, Dave, when I published the first book, we were at the Augusta Chronicle. We were always doing historic stories, and occasionally we would run into a mention of the caddy, but it was generally just by their nickname. And I said, man, that we need to find out who this guy is behind the nickname. Who's Iron Man? Who's Cemetery? Who's Burnt Biscuits? All this kind of stuff. So that intrigued me. Willie Peterson, who caddied for Jack Nicklaus for 5 of his Masters wins, died in 1999. His daughter called our office at the Chronicle and let us know about it. And that sort of moved that forward, going down the old rabbit hole of Ancestry.com, trying to find out how many of these caddies are still living, how many family members are alive, how many friends are still alive. So that was a tremendous amount of research to give these guys their due. I think there's no doubt they had a huge impact on what Nicklaus, what Palmer did, what Hogan did, even President Eisenhower when he played golf at Augusta National. They had caddies that were, that didn't get their due, I don't think. So that was my inspiration to do that, and still is to this day. So,
when and why did it become important for you to make sure that these men and their stories are going to be remembered for a long time, in large part because you're the person who took the time and the energy and the resources to put together this book?
Well, I'm just one of a lot of folks who are trying to help tell this story, and hopefully I can tell it so these guys are remembered. So they're so influential. I'll give you an example. Scotty Scheffler won the Masters this year for a second time. 2 years ago, Carl Jackson, who caddied for Ben Crenshaw, he gave Scotty his yardage book, which was like, sort of a Dead Sea Scrolls kind of thing, to give him that, to let him use that. So that was beneficial for him to learn even more about the golf course. So I think these guys set a tremendously high bar for how to act, how to tell players how to navigate the golf course. And that can't be lost. Even today's current caddies realize how important it is to remember these caddies like Carl and Willie Peterson, Iron Man, and so forth. So those guys didn't make a lot of money because professional golfers didn't make a lot of money. But that's changed. Ted Scott, who caddies for Scotty, he won the Players Championship, won $4.3 million. He won the Masters. He won $3.8 million. And generally, when a caddy wins the tournament, he gets a 10% cut. And math was not my strong suit at Chapel Hill when I was in school, but you can realize pretty quickly that Ted Scott's got a pretty good job.
Yeah.
So, and Teddy is a pretty smart guy too. He'll go to Augusta every year, and he befriended this guy who caddies there to this day named Steve Kling. Kling works at Augusta National. He serves as sort of their scout. They'll come in weeks before the Masters and say, hey, the second tee's changed, 6 degrees changed. And he'll give them the lowdown on it. And Teddy befriended him, and he also stays with him during the Masters. So you can imagine the intelligence he has every day to learn the golf course even more so and help Scotty Scheffler. Not like Scotty needs a lot of help the way he's playing golf, but even at the PGA Championship, when you had the whole situation with Scotty getting arrested, I don't know if you remember, Scotty played pretty good that day.
Yeah.
He shot 66. But the next day, Teddy has gone to Louisiana to see his daughter graduate from high school. Scotty shot 73. So I don't doubt that he was probably a little befuddled by the fact what happened to him the morning before, but also Ted's not there to temper whatever's going through his head. So I think these guys do such a fabulous job. If anybody that's played golf, that's ever played golf with a caddy, just a casual round, it's a completely different thing. I think it's always really cool.
Ward Clayton is joining us. The new book is entitled The Legendary Caddies of Augusta National, Inside Stories from Golf's Greatest Stage. You've known me long enough to know that I'm always intrigued by the overlap of sports and society, or sports and culture. And so much of your book is about Black men working for famous white men at a course that famously did not have Black members for a long, long time. What did you learn the deeper you dove into these very personal stories about these men with fantastic nicknames, but also fantastic stories to tell just about how that worked? In some cases, you're writing about what, 80 or 90 years ago?
Well, the reason I wanted to redo this book this year was largely because over 20 years' time, I really come to a greater understanding about some of the barriers these guys had just to get to work. And I think it's really important to understand some of the deficit they had at the start. There's a neighborhood, and I did a new chapter on this, Dave, in Augusta called Sandhills. For anybody that's in Durham, just think about Hillendale's proximity to Walltown. That's a pretty good parallel. Walltown sprung up because the Black community could go work at Watts Hospital or Duke University or some of the cotton mills or the tobacco factories. It was centrally located. They could easily get to work. Sandhills the same way. Sandhills is located between Augusta National, Augusta Country Club, these historic cemeteries, and these humongous homes on Walton Way in Augusta. Post-Civil War, a lot of the Black communities settled in Sandhills because they could easily get to these big houses where they could serve as like butlers, maids, cooks, work in the yard, things of that nature. Go forward 30 or 40 years, and here these kids are. What kind of job? Just like, Dave, you grew up in Philly. You probably wanted to go work for the, be a bat boy for the Phillies, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
So same way with these kids. They said, oh, I can go next door to Augusta Country Club and I can walk there in 5 blocks and I can learn how to caddy and make $1. Jariah Beard, who caddied for Fuzzy Zeller in '79, tells the great story. His father forbid him from caddying because he figured gambling and caddying were associated. So Jariah went next door and caddied the first time and made $3. He came home, found a coffee can, put the $3 in the coffee can and buried it under his front porch because he didn't want his dad to think he was out gambling. So I think in large part, much like any American kid, these guys got together and said, hey, we can go work next door and learn a trade or a skill. And they became the greatest caddy corps in the world just because they understood how to read people primarily, but how to understand a golf course, how putts broke, yardage to greens. And they didn't use yardage books. They had it right here in their head.
Wow.
So that's always been terrifically inspiring to me. Everybody's got a yardage book. Everybody's got a range finder now. Everybody knows all these, got mapping systems, but these caddies did it by memory. And that's always intrigued me, as they knew the place like the back of their hand.
You mentioned that Jack Nicklaus had the same caddy for 5 of those green jackets. What was your sense of the nature of the relationship? It's still a different society back then, right? But Jack Nicklaus and others are smart enough to know that these guys are integral to their success to a great degree. Is friends too strong of a word, or how would you describe those relationships?
Nicklaus was famous, Dave, for being reliant on just himself. Nicklaus is one of the first professional golfers to take a yardage book and write in it and do his own yardages, all of his own stuff. So Willie was in large part the psychologist behind him. He was like, I'll draw a parallel. Remember Bundini Brown with Muhammad Ali?
Yeah.
That's exactly Willie Peterson. Willie Peterson was this gregarious character. Jack was very reserved. So when Jack would go out and play, Willie would not beyond Willie to take the towel off the bag and twirl it over his head when Nicklaus hit a good shot, like it was a home run. Cool. He would also come from the range by the caddy facility and stick his head in the door and bet everybody in the caddy facility $50 Nicklaus is going to shoot 65 or better, which was a terrible bet, but still it's a good story. So Willie was really sort of the motivation behind Nicklaus. Nicklaus found humor in the way he reacted on the golf course. If you recall, in the early 60s, Arnold Palmer ruled golf, and everybody rooted for him, and they called Nicklaus Fat Jack. So I would think Willie was almost like a bouncer. He was probably somebody in the crowd was giving Jack a grief. He was going to sound off on him. So I think he realized Willie was a good luck charm, was somebody that he could win with, and somebody that was going to, work with him in the way he wanted him to. So I thought that was a pretty cool relationship. Now, if you talk about friends, Ben Crenshaw and Carl Jackson, they say friend before they say caddy. There's no doubt, because Carl worked for him for a number of years, won 2 Masters, and also worked for Jack Stevens, who was the chairman at Augusta National, off the golf course in Arkansas, and still to this day does, even though he's in his late 70s.
I could not have been more proud as someone who's known you for a long time when I learned that there's an ACC basketball tidbit in a book about Augusta Caddies. How the heck did you stumble upon that? And please, of course, share that with our audience.
Well, there's 2 of them. Well, there's actually 3. Will Avery, who's a first-year assistant on the Duke basketball program, played at Duke. Will left Duke after 2 years in 1999, went on to the NBA, went on to play in Europe, and did not get his degree. 3 years ago, Will came back and got his degree at Duke, number one, to show his kids that you could do that. And secondly, he had to have a degree to become an assistant coach. Will's great uncle was Nathaniel Ironman Avery, who caddied for Arnold Palmer. So that's a connection. But at the same time, at North Carolina A&T, there's a guy named Ricky Moore. Ricky Moore was the point guard on the 99 Connecticut team, which beat Duke in the championship game. Yeah. Ricky's dad is Buck Moore, who caddied at Augusta National for 30 years.
Wow.
And now it's hard to me to believe in time. 25 years ago, Connecticut beat Duke in that national championship game, which Ricky Moore, same high school backcourt as William Avery at Westside High School in Augusta, facing off in the national championship game. So that's a cool connection. And I'll take it even further, going to Pinehurst this week. There's a gentleman from Pinehurst who's no longer with us. His name is Felton Capel. Felton Capel helped integrate the town of Southern Pines. He was on the committee that helped bring the U.S. Open to Pinehurst. Felton's grandson is Jeff Capel and Jason Capel, who are now at Pitt. So Felton was the only black gentleman on that statewide committee, which include governors, business titans, bankers who helped bring the golf tournament there. It was 30 years ago when they started organizing this. So Felton Capel had a big part in bringing the U.S. Open to Pinehurst, which seems like they're going to be there every 5 years now. So pretty cool that he had a piece of that, and his grandsons are in this, similar vein or important cogs in history of the ACC.
One of my favorite restaurants in Raleigh for many years now has been The Oak Scratch Kitchen and Bourbon Bar. It's located on Lake Boone Trail, which is a perfect location for a great meal and beverage if you're on your way to nearby Carter Finley Stadium or perhaps PNC Arena for a concert, Wolfpack or Hurricanes game, or other event. The menu is incredibly tasty and creative. The atmosphere is a lot of fun. The bourbon options are as high-end and varied as you'll find anywhere. The staff is super classy and first-rate, and I've just always loved the people, the food, and the overall vibe there. When I took Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon to lunch, yes, meaning the billionaire who owns the hockey team, I took him to the Oak. Seriously, it's that good. Learn more or make a reservation by visiting their website, theoakraleigh.com. That's theoakraleigh.com. Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas and Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE. Ward Clayton is joining us on the David Glenn Show. You mentioned some parallels, as well as Augusta National, and as a native North Carolinian, I imagine you have some excitement about Pinehurst hosting the U.S. Open this year. As somebody who had golf as such a big part of your childhood right here in Durham, North Carolina, what does come to mind as all of us in this state and a lot of golf fans elsewhere are looking forward to the great state of North Carolina getting to play host to the entire golf world, really, for that rare major championship on our soil?
Pinehurst is, without a doubt, the St. Andrews of the United States. Anybody and everybody comes to Pinehurst to play golf. And now they've got, 10 golf courses under the resort name and a whole slew of them outside of that.
Yeah.
But it's such a cool it's very much like Augusta, Dave. Augusta is a pretty mid-sized to small southern town, and Pinehurst is, they call it the village of Pinehurst. So I think it's similar. It's fairly rural outside of the town, but yet you can get there. The group I mentioned earlier that helped bring the U.S. Open to Pinehurst, I don't know if you remember this or not, but Jim Hunt, who was not a golfer, was essential in making sure that US 1 from Raleigh all the way to Pinehurst was 4-laned before the 99 US Open came there. He did a few things to make sure you could get from RDU down to Pinehurst, because I remember when I was a kid trying to get from Durham to Pinehurst, that was a long trip, but no longer. US 1 is a speedway now. Was the speed limit 70 from Raleigh all the way down to Pinehurst? Yeah. And there's not a lot of people going 70, Dave. They're going a little quicker than that. So I think Pinehurst is just so cool that they figured out, number one, how to bring a publicly accessible venue to U.S. Opens. Pinehurst sort of set the bar for that. And secondly, they really set the bar for bringing in corporate entities. I think Jim Hyler, who's from Raleigh, who was a former banker, member at Augusta National, he said they had a goal in '99 of having 30 corporate partners. They had 50 and a waiting list.
Wow.
So that's how big of a corporate venture that was. And that group, I think it's called the President's Council, is still intact. When the driving range will be full of tents for U.S. Open week, they'll turn the Cradle into the driving range. And it's become such a successful venture for anybody. Even if you're not a golfer, you got to go to the U.S. Open in North Carolina and just check it out and walk around the property and see all the history there. I think that's pretty cool.
I mentioned at least 3 events that you have on your visit here to our great state here in the first half of June. I don't know if you have all those details right in front of you or if you can give us a website or whatever. And maybe you could give us more details about how much downtime there'll be if people just want to talk golf with you. But
Sure.
I'm actually about 10 minutes from your first stop. The one at Wake Forest, North Carolina, is very, very close to my home. That's Sunday, June 9th. Then Durham on Monday night at Hillendale. That's June 10th. And then Southern Pines on Tuesday night, June 11th. What else can you tell us about those or anything else you have going on?
Wake Forest, 4 p.m. on Sunday, the 9th at Page 158 Bookstore, which is just around the corner from Pascal Golf Course, which is where Arnold Palmer played golf when he was in school at Wake Forest. Imagine that, Gigi, I'll just take this as an aside. Imagine if Wake Forest had never moved to Winston-Salem. What would the craziness of ACC football and basketball?
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I just had a friend of my wife visiting and staying at our house. He's from New York. He doesn't know all of the ACC details, but he loves college sports from afar. And he saw Wake Forest, North Carolina, because he's driving around Raleigh. And he said, "You mean to tell me that the Tar Heels, the Blue Devils, and the Wolfpack and the Demon Deacons are all this close to each other?" And I said, "Not exactly." So I got into that story, but you're right, man. Can you I mean, most people know by now Wake Forest University was once in Wake Forest, North Carolina. It's now, 90 minutes to our west, but it's still great rivalries and all, the Big Four, et cetera. But I can't imagine. I can't. My imaginary skills are not that good.
So I'm doing that Sunday. Then Monday night, not putting down the other two venues, but I grew up about 5 blocks from Hillendale.
Yeah.
Golf course. When I was 12 years old, I went to the kids' clinic. None of my family members play golf. I never touched a golf club, but I went over there because it was a summer place I could go and be safe. So I learned how to play golf there. So I went to Hillendale to play golf. 2 miles in the other direction is Cameron Indoor Stadium. And even though I'm a Tar Heel and, but Duke basketball at Cameron Indoor Stadium, it was nothing like it.
Yeah.
So I'm a very much a product of my environment. To this day, golf and college basketball are still vitally important to me. So we're going to do this thing at Hillendale Monday night, and they're going to clear out the golf shop and seat people inside. And I'm going to speak, and we're going to sign. We're going to, it might be trouble to have people from Durham and some of the people in my fraternity in Chapel Hill come, and there's an open bar. So,
and is that one that you need a ticket for?
Yeah, you need a ticket. You have to purchase a ticket for that through Eventbrite. And Hillendale Golf Course's website and Blair Publisher, which is our publisher located on 9th Street in Durham, you can get that there. But there's limited seating, as you can imagine. Hillendale's golf shop is not the biggest in the world. But I'm looking forward to talking about not only Augusta National and the Caddies, but Hillendale is 113 years old. It's hard to believe. Some people lose a sense for what Hillendale is all about because it goes back to 1911. It's had such a history there of hosting amateur tournaments. Dave, in 1944, I didn't know this till about a year ago, the Durham Open was held in Durham, which is a PGA Tour event, and the first 2 rounds were held at Hillendale.
Wow.
Which is really cool. So you can say officially Hillendale is a PGA Tour venue. There's a cool program at Hillendale called the Swing Pals program, which they've gone into all the middle schools in Durham. It's very much like the First Tee program, and bring kids out to Hillendale to allow them to learn what golf's about. And they also go into middle schools and teach them how to swing a golf club, how to act properly, how to interact with people, things of that nature. So there's some benefits going on when we do this Monday night there. So I'm really looking forward to that, and that'll be cool. And then the last one, Tuesday nights in Southern Pines at the Country Bookstore, which is in the middle of Southern Pines. And it's really a historic bookstore right beside the Pilot newspaper. So they've got all the golf books you can imagine there. So that'll be fun to do that in Southern Pines. So I'm gonna go 3 for 3. I'm gonna go up and down US 1 and thank Jim Hunt for making it 4 lanes and making it so you can get back and forth pretty quickly.
As I let you go, I do invite you to mention anything about the book that you'd like people to know about that maybe we have not tackled. But my last question, and again, the forum is yours beyond my question. I am not kowtowing to a guest that I really like a lot when I say this. I really try not to exaggerate. But I have traveled the world to a small degree. I've traveled the world of American sports to a great degree. And I don't know of a place with a greater attention to detail or a protectiveness toward their brand than Augusta National, where you've spent a lot of time and of course is central to your book about the Caddies. Did they cooperate, help you? Are they excited about your book? Like they just, I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful people, but we all know as journalists the difference between cooperative and supportive and throwing up roadblocks. So I'm just curious because they are meticulous in many good ways. You can't find a gum wrapper, on the floor, on the ground. I mean,
Yep.
you know the deal. I've been there enough times that I'm shocked at the cleanliness of the men's room. And for those who have been there, like, that's not a joke. Like, there are people making sure the men's room is perfect when you're at the Masters. It's crazy. Anyway,
no doubt.
That's a very long-winded question. Go ahead.
No doubt. Well, 20 years ago when I first did this, there was probably some apprehension on their part. I didn't ask for their permission or anything like that. I just mentioned what I was doing. And I think they understood. And once that first book came out, you can't get in the way of truth, Dave.
Yeah.
So, I told the true story, and I did it once again this year. I think over the last 3 to 5 years, Augusta National, even though they did this before, they're doing this in a public way now, are reaching out into the community. And I'll give you some examples. Next year, there's a public golf course in Augusta that's called the Augusta Municipal Course, more affectionately called the Patch. Very much of a 100-year-old municipal course, which is very rough around the edges. Next January, Augusta National is partnering with the First Tee and Augusta Tech to redo the golf course.
Wow.
And that's going to be really cool. You can go play there for $30 or something like that now. And I think that price point will continue. And what they hope to do, I think, is Augusta Tech's going to come in and with its agronomy program, if people want to get involved in agronomy, like become course superintendents or work in the hotel kind of sense for, in the service industry, they're going to be able to learn how to do that there. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic that might follow suit at other places around the country. There's a huge resurgence of municipal courses around the country that are being reinvented. If you go to Wilmington, which I'm
glad you mentioned that. I love that Muni course in Wilmington.
It's unbelievable. That you can go there and play for $40, and it's an original Donald Ross golf course, and you can't get on the golf course. It's full all the time.
It's nice too.
So, they're doing that up in Asheville at the municipal course in Asheville. They just did it in Charleston, South Carolina. So you can look at a lot of towns that had a really historic golf course, which people didn't play because it wasn't in the greatest condition in the world. And that's turned on its head. People are realizing that's a recreational opportunity. So hint to the people in Durham about Hillendale, which is a municipal course owned by the city. Boy, you ought to protect that piece of property because it, location is always the number one thing for a golf course. And as you well know, that's, you got to, in order to get to Duke University, in order to get into downtown Durham, you got to get off 85 and go by Hillendale more than likely. So
this is true.
Hopefully that will carry forward. So I will tell you that in Augusta, in addition to that, they're putting up an historical artwork in Sandhills over next year. They've got a local Black artist in Augusta who's working on that currently. There's a play in Augusta called Men on the Bag Experience, and I saw it before the Masters, and it was like I was seeing Hamilton for golf, Dave.
Wow.
It had local actors portraying some of these caddies, and they interspersed Motown music in the middle of the performance. And when I was at one of the shows, there were 60 people there, and they were singing My Girl by the Temptations, and everybody was singing in unison. So that was really cool unto itself. So I think there's a lot of efforts going on now to remember what these guys did as caddies to influence today's caddies, not just at Augusta, but everywhere.
You can learn more about Ward's book. I mean, it's available everywhere now. And guys like Burnt Biscuits and Cricket and Iron Man and Fireball and Cemetery and Pappy and Stovepipe and all the rest. The book's name, one more time, is The Legendary Caddies of Augusta National, Inside Stories from Golf's Greatest Stage. Our guest, of course, is the author, Ward Clayton. It's great to see you, my friend. You are welcome to say anything else that's on your mind on your way out, but thanks for the time. Congratulations on the book, and keep up the good work.
Well, I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having me on to talk about it. Blair Pub, BLAIRPUB.com. It's not a place you have a drink, even though that would be bad.
Yeah.
So Blair Pub, you can get it there. You can go to Amazon. You can go to your local independent bookseller or anything like that. So my effort is just to try to tell their story, to make sure that people know the contribution they made, and that's where I'm coming from.
Glad you did it, man. I hope your trip back here to your original home is a great one, and I hope to see you at some point. I'll be down there in Pinehurst.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. That's Ward Clayton.
Have a good day.
Check out the book. Thanks to Mike Waddell for producing for us today, and thanks to you for being with us today on the David Glenn Show, here exclusively on the North Carolina Sports Network.